From valuing yourself to wanting to be treated exactly the same way that you are willing to treat others. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jason Burns.
And I'm Danny Nucci, and this is the What About podcast.
Danny, I am alone with the kids this week. My wife is traveling, and I just got to give a shout out to all the single parents out there because I do not know how they do it. And this is the only time that I ever question having so many pets in my life. Holy shit. I don't even know what to do. I really don't.
It's no joke. It takes a village isn't a cliche. It takes a village.
It takes a village, and I'm doing it while the kids are still in school here on the East Coast. I know a lot of the country is not in school anymore, but holy hell, man. I just don't. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's what do they say? I mean, I'm just full of cliches. It's the hardest job you'll ever love.
It is. It's
just a lot because you want to do it right. You want to be present for them, but you've got responsibilities. There's not enough time in the day. It's a lot. And especially with the extracurriculars, then you're going from this thing to that thing, your cab driver, your cook, your chef. And it's a lot. I'm being overwhelmed just thinking about it. And my kids are grown.
You want to stop by and take the dogs for a walk for me?
Yeah, I'm happy to fly over and come take the dogs for a walk. Well, that's the other thing. Dogs themselves, it's like everybody that I know that has a dog. I got to go back and feed the dog. I've got to go. I can't leave the dog.
But I use that as an excuse too. Oh, I can't make it.
Well, I think other people do too. I mean, that's how I know they don't want to hang out with me anymore. So that's how I figured it out. But I have enough self-worth.
Ooh, very nice. Very nice.
Which is our topic today, which we talked to Ian Karmel about. He's got a new book coming out called T-Shirt Swim Club. The very funny, talented, and svelte Ian Karmel.
That roast was so good. I got to write jokes for Nikki during the roast. It was fantastic.
For the Tom Brady roast?
For the Tom Brady roast, yeah.
Oh man, I'm a New England guy, so I'm in Massachusetts right now. It was a wonderfully painful thing to watch.
Oh,
poor Gronk. I mean, the poor guy.
Oh, I know.
Oh God, everybody was taking hits for everything, but everybody just took shots at Gronk's intelligence.
He couldn't not go because it would have looked weird, but at the same time, it's like he had to you had to have known when you showed up. He's just this big piñata.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was surprised by how raw the whole thing was. I mean, pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless.
Well, once it got off Comedy Central and got onto a streaming platform, it could go back to how they were before they were televised, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
I love these live events they're doing. We got Tom Brady's roast and then next Mike Tyson fight coming up in a few months,
that's right.
Which is crazy. Yeah,
man. And then the live stand-up specials too. I didn't see Cat Williams's, but I imagine it was fairly, raw as he is.
Well, Ian Karmel, thanks for joining us, man. This is fantastic.
My pleasure.
Ian, where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles, California.
That's where I am, Los Angeles, California.
Oh, beautiful. I'm in Atwater Village.
Sure, not too far from me. I'm right by the Hollywood sign.
Danny knows I'm going to ask this, Ian, and I have to because I love a good color-coded bookshelf. Look at that. Is that you? Is that your choice?
It's the wife.
I would love to take credit for it.
Okay.
If it was me, it would be a loose pile of books on the floor. But no, she color-coded it. She also knows how to find which books. So she's so smart that not only has she color-coded it, she's also memorized the title to the color.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And you got some real live greenery there too. Get a little fresh oxygen while you're recording.
Absolutely. That I can take some credit for. In that I bought the house that had windows in it.
Mm-hmm. All right. There you go.
That's about the extent of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice work, Ian. Nice work.
Thank you very much. I like to there's plants all over the house, which because it's a thing that makes it look nice, like you're making an effort, but all you have to do is water it once every 2 weeks, and that's about the amount of effort I'm capable.
What about outside? You got plants outside?
Baby, it's LA. I got like orange trees, I got a persimmon tree,
Ooh.
I got a big grapefruit tree that drops the most disgusting grapefruit you've ever tried in your life. They're so bitter. They're so terrible. They're useful for nothing, but aesthetically it's pretty cool.
Nice. Well,
yeah.
Ian Karmel, we were sent the book a couple
Are
weeks
you going to say his whole name every time?
I am
just
because
need
I
to
like
know.
saying it. Rolls
Okay.
off the tongue. Karmel.
Okay.
I got one of those first
Ian
elastic.
Karmel.
Yes.
You like to hit both of them.
You know Ian Karmel?
Ian Karmel. I got a guy who used to work with him, Rob Crabb, and you could not help but say his
can't
entire
say. You have
name.
to say Rob Crabb.
Rob Crabb.
Have to.
Well, Ian Karmel, the book was fantastic,
Thank you very much.
but I have to ask, you had to revisit a lot that you had to or have been externalizing for years, internalizing and then go out and externalize it now. Was it a tough decision to do this book?
It was not a tough decision to write the book.
It was just tough to write the book.
It was tough to write the book. The decision,
I mean, it's a book after all. You got to write it.
Yeah, you have to sit down and get it out of you. The decision to write it was pretty easy because I got, just in case, I weighed 420 pounds. I was fat my entire life. I was a fat kid. I'm 6'3".
6'3", how much? 400?
6'3", 420. Full-blown Baltimore Ravens defensive.
I was going to say, can you play the 3 technique? I mean, we could use you over at Indy. Go on, anyway.
I could have for a while. I was unfortunately not quite the athletic kind of 420. Although I played high school football. But I was very big, and up until I was about 35 when the pandemic hit, and then things kind of slowed down enough, and I was doing Postmates 3 meals a day for 3 weeks. And once I realized that they weren't going to flatten the curve the way they said, I was like, oh, I might be here for a while. And if I keep eating Panda Express every day, I'm going to die, which is ironic because that's what I was doing before the pandemic. I was eating Panda Express.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did the pandemic change your perspective to such a degree? Because you were basically already 400 pounds, right?
Right. I was already living like that, but it slowed things down and it made it harder to lie to yourself. And it held everything in this stark relief where you really, you're not like grabbing lunch at work. You're not going out to dinner with friends. You're like,
well, and Ian, as a stand-up, when you're on the road, it's got to be fucking tough, right?
It's impossible. Often, I did this club in Kansas City early on in my career. Kansas City, Kansas, by the way, not even Kansas City, Missouri. And the healthiest food option was Hooters. The healthiest food, and I would get Hooters to go because I felt so uncomfortable sitting there eating it. But you would get Hooters to go, and you would take it back to your hotel room and eat it perched on your bed like a gargoyle while the Food Network played. But I finally, I lost the weight.
Good visual, man. That is a hell of
that's
really
what it
good
is.
Visual.
Anyone who has spent significant time in hotels knows that feeling of just housing takeout food. Wow, it's always either the Food Network or an episode of Law and Order, but it's always one of those 2 television shows.
Sure.
But I lost the weight. And I was on the other side of it. I just through diet and exercise, just really sticking.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's just fucking pump the brakes here for a second. Then I lost the weight, 250 pounds. I mean, how much weight did you lose there, guy?
I lost around 200 at the most.
Okay, so you lost 200 pounds by what? Yeah. Eating your vegetables and exercising?
It was frustratingly simple. Now, when I say simple, I don't mean easy. I mean, it was very, very hard, but it was very, very simple for me. And it was just, I ate between noon and 8, which is intermittent fasting. Sure. It also just sort of fit my regular body, like when I got hungry. Like I haven't eaten yet today.
So again, as a stand-up, Ian, like were you used to also eating really late?
Yes.
Like after sets and stuff?
All the time. I would eat, you'd get off stage at the second show, it'd be midnight. And the only places that
you're starving.
You're starving, and there aren't any salad bars open at midnight. All of those people have been in bed for hours,
And at midnight, you don't want a salad bar, you want a patty melt.
I was just in Madison, Wisconsin doing shows over the weekend. And now that I've gotten to where I want to be, sort of a place where I can maintain a sort of 20-pound up or down stasis, I will allow myself a little bit more frequently, treats. So I got off stage at midnight. We went to this place called Ian's Pizza in Madison, ironically. It felt like it had been built for me. But, you went in there and they had like pizza that had macaroni and cheese on top of the pizza.
Outstanding.
Which was amazing.
I was going to say outstanding. Good. Sounds terrific.
It was beautiful. It felt, and to be in Wisconsin, the land of cheese.
Good point.
This amount of cheese. It's like having Burgundy in Burgundy.
So you're during the pandemic, you med the decision basically because you couldn't look at yourself in the mirror. You felt disgusted and there was nowhere to hide. I'm assuming.
It was less than looking in the mirror. I had this experience where my brain always normalized when I look in the mirror. Like, weirdly, when I look in the mirror right now, I see the exact same person as when I was 420 pounds. It's because your brain always finds the most flattering angle. It's you're focusing on your eyes for the most part. You can't help it.
You're focusing on your eyes for the most part. That's not what happens over here. My eyes.
You should. You have beautiful eyes.
God bless you.
Yeah, those eyebrows too are top notch.
It's a lot. It's a lot of eyebrow. Yeah. It's a lot
but
of eyebrow.
It wasn't until I saw pictures of myself after I lost the weight where I was like, holy shit. Like I didn't realize quite how big I was, because you do the best you can to normalize. And at least for me, I wanted to give myself as much ammunition as I could to go through life and try to feel like a regular person.
It wasn't footage for you? It wasn't looking at footage? Because like I watched myself in a couple of things, and I was just like, okay, when did my fat dad get the role? I don't know what happened. Like all of a sudden you're just like, how did that, like I looked like my father who, put on 20 pounds.
For me, I was fat the whole time. I was fat the whole time. So there
was no contrast for you. I see.
Until I lost the weight, right?
Sure.
So it was more of it was less looking in the mirror and more things in my life slowing down enough that I could have a realistic moment with myself about what my weight was doing to my health. Because to be quite frank, like I did not have a lot of trouble once I became confident, through stand-up comedy and through being on TV, and sort of found a amount of self-confidence that I could pull from. I wasn't having problems with girls necessarily. I could find people to go on dates with. I could find people to hook up with. That actually wasn't really much of a problem with me. So I could build this sort of simulation of a life where there wasn't an issue. And honestly, there was 90% of my life where there wasn't an issue, but there was this 10%. Maybe
you're
more.
The funny fat guy. It's working.
It's a beautiful archetype, and one that has been tested throughout time, right?
Sure.
Not one that you see a lot of people in their 50s.
Although the ones I'm thinking of are now dead. So yes, go on. Yeah.
They all die at a horribly early age.
Yeah.
So did you sit down? You mentioned your wife, Ian. Did you sit down with your wife and say, this is what I'm going to do? I need to push me, hold me to the flame, and do all that?
It was just me. I hadn't even met her yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
Journey. Yeah. It was just me.
So this is relatively new, this marriage?
2 years. 2 years in September.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to interrupt you because I want to go back to you started doing intermittent fasting. You ate between 12 and 8, did you say?
8 o'clock,
12 and 8. And you'd done this for a while, and did you change your diet? Did you change what you were eating?
Well, I was not intermittent fasting before. I started that when I started to lose weight. I changed the kind of food. Everything changed. The time I ate, so that's when I adopted the noon to 8. And I started on this program because I couldn't, I was afraid to go to grocery stores. Everyone was. So I found a place that delivered food to your door. And there was an option where it was just protein, vegetables, and fruit, right? Where there were like 2 meals and then 3 snacks. And the snacks were literally half an orange, an apple, some blueberries, a thing of lettuce. Those were the snacks. And then the meals were like, okay, it's a chicken burger and lettuce instead of a bun, that kind of thing. What I needed at first was like a hard line in the sand. I needed not to have the other options in the house either.
Right. Especially when you're only in the house and bored, probably out of your mind at that point too.
Bored out of your mind. I was lucky enough to keep working because the show I was working on went remote, but I was so fucking bored and I was so hungry. And the way I treated boredom, anxiety, all of those feelings for my entire life was with food, right? And here I was in the most anxious part of my life because like you're like, oh my God, is the Black Plague starting again? Like what's going to happen? So I'm anxious, I'm bored, all of these things, and I had to make it so I only had healthy options in the house. And for the first few months of, we call it the diet, but really it was like a hard lifestyle change because here's the thing about a diet. We all know this, right? It will work. Every diet works. As long as
the willpower, you need the willpower to do it.
As long as you do that diet, anything will work. So I needed to make like a lifestyle change, which is what it was for me. For the first 4 months of it, 3 months of it, I was starting to lose weight a little bit, although I didn't weigh myself because that number was just so horrifying every time I looked at the scale, but I could feel it in my body.
You could probably feel it in your clothing as well, right? Like once things
in my clothing, yeah, everywhere. And I finally was up in Portland, so I drove up I'm from Portland, Oregon originally, and I drove up from LA to Portland just to see my family for the first time in 6 months since the pandemic started. And things were feeling a little looser. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'm here for a little while. I can go have some drinks. I can go get some takeout food from a restaurant I like. So I had some drinks on a patio with some friends for the first time drinking in like 6 months. I had some junk food for the first time in like 3 months since I started eating well. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning at 4 a.m. with my heart like pounding in my chest.
Oh.
And when you're as big as I was and as unhealthy as I was, there's a part of your brain that you suppress that is like, hey, one of these days is going to be the day you have a heart attack, or one of these days is going to be the day you have a stroke. And you can tell yourself when you're 35, I'm too young for that. That's not yet. That's not happening yet. That's 40. That's 45. That's 50. That's whatever age, right? That's not necessarily the case. So I was laying in bed, feeling my heart just like absolutely pounding in my chest like a way I'd never felt before. And I got up and I walked down. I was staying in a friend's apartment, and I walked down to the sidewalk and dialed 911 into my phone and didn't hit send because I didn't want to deal with the reality of what it would mean to actually call an ambulance. I didn't want to sort of admit to myself that I was actually.
You were going to wait till the last second to hit it?
I was going to wait until I was going to let my falling body hit the green button.
Oh, man.
And my heart started to calm down a little bit. And I was like, okay, I guess that's not a heart attack. And from what little I knew, I was like, maybe I had a panic attack. And it turned out that it was a panic attack, but that was enough to get me to go to urgent care that night. And I went to urgent care and they took my blood pressure like they do every time you go to the doctor. I hadn't been to the doctor in years.
Also part of not wanting to have to deal with it, Ian? Like
exactly right. Also part of like sticking your head in the sand where you're like, hey, I can build a happy life for myself. I have friends. I go out to eat. I go out to shows. I drink. I do drugs. I hook up with girls. I have a happy life. Why stop the party by having a doctor tell me this information that I sort of intuitively know?
Which is why you didn't want to go to the doctor. I mean, that's the reason, right?
Exactly right. But I went and they were like, hey, your blood pressure is 212 over, I forget the second number. And I didn't know what that meant, but I assumed it was bad because they gave me like an IV drip to get my blood pressure down. And I called my mother, who's a nurse, and I told her, and she was like, could not hide the horror in her voice, like 200.
The panic,
the 200 over something.
And this was well after the panic attack too, right? The blood pressure had not come down.
This was late. This was like at 8 o'clock that night.
Wow.
So this was more than 12 hours later. And it was, it was traumatic. It was, I think people use the word trauma maybe a little too freely where they're like.
You think these days? You think that's not, it's like, really?
I think
it encompasses everything.
Like,
I've been traumatized by your inability to say thank you.
There was a long line at the grocery store and it was traumatized.
Bro,
and now I'm
traumatizing.
Like,
everything's traumatizing.
This
fucking
was.
Grow a pair.
It's fucking, I'm so with you on that. It's so obnoxious. But I have to, that this event was on a very low scale.
This event is trauma. You're thinking you're going to die. Of course. That is traumatizing.
But Ian, can I just step back there though? This is not a doctor, you know. You don't have a doctor, right? So this is basically a stranger telling you this?
A stranger at a bougie urgent care in Portland, Oregon. Like an urgent care that they tried to like make like a hipster core Portland ass urgent care.
Was it subscription based? Did they want you to subscribe?
They wanted me to like and subscribe. They wanted me to follow them on TikTok.
And you get an IPA on the way out.
They gave me a dystolic IPA on my way out. But they so they got me and they were like, hey, you need to be in regular contact with a doctor throughout this. We're gonna put you on this drug for now, but you need to go talk to an actual doctor. And it was a traumatic enough event, again, somewhere between microaggression and Fallujah, like for me, to go and actually
what a scope. Go on.
Probably closer to microaggression than Fallujah, but still
there's a lot of room there. A lot of room.
And I started going to the doctor regularly and it fucking sucked. This is another part that like I try to make clear in the book, and I also try to make clear to everyone who especially other fat dudes and fat people in general who I talk to about this, where I'm like, it sucked at first. Every time I went to the doctor, from that first one at the urgent care where it sucked more than any other thing had sucked almost in my entire life. Every time, your blood pressure is too high, your blood sugar is too high, you're carrying too much weight.
You're pre-diabetic.
You're pre-diabetic.
On, right?
All these all this information that just like hammers your psyche and your ego and your spirit and your soul. And also the kind of information that I always treated with food in the past, where I was like, oh, bad news, I'll go get an ice cream cone, and at least I'll think about that ice cream cone instead of the bad news.
Did you start doing the I'll start tomorrow? Well, yeah, this is bad. I'll start tomorrow. One more burger.
For years.
Well, if you had those, like you mentioned having that panic attack, when you knew that you had a doctor's appointment coming up, did you start to feel that stress too?
I would start to feel that stress. And I had, during this period, quite a few panic attacks. But part of that panic attack thing was also my doctor made me start taking my blood pressure at home. And that was a journey. That would it would make you anxious. You would take your blood pressure, you would get a number that you didn't quite want, and that would make you anxious. And then it would go up because you're anxious. And then I started getting into meditation too. And throughout this journey, I had to sort of acknowledge the fact that I had anxiety. I had pretty bad anxiety. I, again, never wanted to acknowledge that I was an anxious person, because I was like, I was like fun. I liked partying.
So you're basically doing emotional speed and quaaludes at this hour. Oh shit, I got to think that. Oh, but I got to meditate and you're like driving yourself insane.
But what I took from your book, Ian, was that being the fun guy was kind of your shield at times.
Absolutely. It was completely my shield. It was how I identified to give myself a role I could play in society, and also to shield myself, more importantly than anything.
And because you mentioned in the book too that Beaverton, which I think was the town you grew up in, correct?
That's right.
So that you said it was almost more unusual to the kids in town that you were Jewish than you were overweight. But it sounded like, by being funny guy, you got to pick your own label and not go by the labels that other people gave.
It's exactly right. You figure out early on in like grade school that you're different, right?
As my wife would ask, how Jewish are you? Because that's what she says to me. You're not that Jewish. I'm like, I didn't know there was a measure.
I'm not like growing the braids out, wearing the yarmulke all the time, but I got a bar mitzvah. I go to synagogue during the high holidays, and then maybe other time.
I got bar mitzvah, same thing. Yeah. Like, but you're a Nucci. I'm like, it's a long story, but yes, I was bar mitzvah.
I like to describe myself as a Beastie Boys Jew rather than a Read the Torah Jew.
Sure. That's, by the way, it's very good, Beastie Boys Jew.
Yeah, it's a great kind of Jew to be. That's the kind of Jew I am.
It is. Sure.
And
so you're in Beaverton, you're a fat Jew, and then what's happening?
And you're learning on the grade school, like out of recess, that, hey, you're different. Like, people start picking on you for being fat, because kids will find whatever thing and they'll pick on that. And I was like, all right, I need to get in on this. I can feel my status slipping. I can feel myself becoming a target. It hurts when they make fun of me. It makes me feel different. So I'm like, you know what? Let me beat them to the punch. I'm smart. I'm pretty funny. And you become funnier because you need to think faster than the bullies, right? You need to be able to get to the punchline before they do.
Sure.
And at least you're in on it. It still sucks, but at least like then you're in on it. You're making people laugh. So you're taking part in your own humiliation to a degree, if you want to get deep with it. But
absolutely. It's the same thing as not going to the doctor. It's not dealing with the bully, because you're just going to bully yourself instead.
Exactly right. So I started doing that, and I developed a sense of humor, and I started playing football, and that gave me even more identity, because I was this, you were
the tank on the field, right? I mean,
I was the tank. I was the defensive tackle. I blew up the middle every single time. Nobody could get past me. I was good. Really, I was very big, and I was a little bit good. But in high school in Beaverton, Oregon,
you were good enough.
I was
to take up a lot of space.
Exactly.
But you also probably got validation from coaches that you didn't get without being in sports.
Massive. It was the first time anyone ever told me that my body was not only okay, but in fact good. Right. And I think we do that to kids, the big kids who, I mean, to be frank, it would have been better for me to have been the worst guy on the cross country team than to have been one of the better players on the football team, because at least then they would have been making me jog and talking to me about my diet, But that didn't happen, because you're being incentivized to be a big dude and you're being celebrated.
Well, and this is also, correct me if I'm wrong, 90s.
Early 2000s. So I got to high school in 99.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, being a cross-country letterman, you missed nothing.
Okay.
Just letting you know.
Girls don't want to wear the cross-country letterman jacket.
We would always watch them at football practice, and I would be like, those fucking idiots. Their entire day is the last half hour of our practice. Why are they doing that?
Yeah. Basically, that was it.
But they were in better shape than I was. It was ultimately better for them in the long run, even if I had a great time playing football. I don't want to demonize it at all. I loved it. It was some of the best moments of my life. I think I learned a lot of good skills there, but I also had some unhealthier things about myself valorized and validated.
Well, let me ask you this, Ian, because in the book, you do not shy away from using the word fat, and you've used it in this conversation here.
Yeah.
Being where we are in the world right now, did the publisher push back on that? Your editor try to say, hey, let's not say this?
No, they were great. They were great about it. They let me. I also I think in the book I lay out the fact that it's not the word's fault that people are mean to fat people.
Right. It's how you use it.
We do that with everything, man. We hey, it's not, hey, by the way, we're not saying homeless anymore. We're saying unhoused. So what I mean to say is I find that unhoused person disgusting and I don't want them anywhere near me. That's what people do.
Yep.
I know, it's the way
They try to dress up the language, and what we end up doing is we treat these words like they're, that we let them soak up all the pain, and then we throw out that word and we put a new word in there, and then that word starts soaking up the pain.
Just give them too much power. We give the words way too. The words already have their own power. We don't need to give them any more power, and that's which is a separate topic. So here you are. You're a heavy kid. You realize you're really funny. You're making friends. This is working for you. Do you go to college at this point?
Yeah.
Do you go out? I'm going to school. Where do you go? You going to school locally? Where did you go to school?
I went to Southern Oregon University for 1 year because I was like, okay.
Where is Southern Oregon?
Ashland, Oregon.
Ashland, very nice. I like Ashland.
Beautiful,
Oregon.
bucolic, very small town. Felt kind of like
a lot of retirees in Ashland.
A lot of retirees. Not a great place for a excitable 18-year-old.
A young person.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and that's the chapter where you talk about just going to a park and chilling out by yourself, right? Like being very retrospective about everything there.
I did. I turned into a very Henry David Thoreau sort of kid. I would go because I was just so bored. I would go.
Was it communications? What did you take? Did you go right to communications?
I don't think I picked a major freshman year, and then I immediately transferred to Portland State University so I could go be in a bigger city. Because Ashland is gorgeous. I love Ashland, but I got so bored that I was like, I have to get out of here.
I've spent time there. It's beautiful, but there's not a lot going on.
It's a time for introspection, but eventually you get tired of being introspective even.
Yes. It goes from introspection to self-indulgent, self-centered.
Yeah, it went from introspection to Everclear for me. It was what is
So you go to Portland State, and are you doing comedy? Are you getting up now? Are you like do you have a mic? What's going on?
I have 6 mics. We've talked about that. You know how many microphones.
No, I know, but are you doing open? What I meant to say, prick, is are you doing open mic nights now?
No, I took a improv class. So I started in improv. I needed arts credits to graduate, right? I was doing I was doing political science, but the idea was that I was either going to get into journalism or go to law school, and you needed an arts credit to graduate. And I started.
And your uncle taught that class, right?
My uncle taught improv, and I was like, easy street, baby. He's not going to fail me. And I went in there, and I swear, like, may we all be granted moments in our life that have this much clarity. But in 5 minutes into that class, something clicked in my brain.
This is me.
I was like, this is it.
Yeah, this is me.
This is me. My entire life. Everything, I was always good at kind of making people laugh and thinking quickly, as a self-defense mechanism as much as anything else. I was a sort of a dilettante. Like I knew a little bit about a lot of things, but I didn't know a lot about anything. And that was great too, because you could pull on references and stuff.
Sure.
And I was just getting immediate affirmation in the form of laughs, because that's the thing. Like when you're, whatever it is, the hole inside of you're trying to fill, whether that's a fat kid or whatever,
But Ian, that was one of my questions is what your relationship with laughter is, because you spent this whole time where laughter was kind of like, it was kind of like you were getting it, but not always for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So is it a complicated relationship that you have with laughter?
Not no more.
No, not anymore. And not even then, not in the moment, right? It was a complicated in retrospect sort of relationship. But in the moment, you're like, I don't care if this cocaine is stepped on, it still feels like cocaine to me. That's how it felt. I was getting the laughs. And as I got more into performance, as I got more into improv and eventually into stand-up comedy, I could dictate even more. I could take the bullies out of the equation entirely. I was just speaking to an audience, and I did a lot of fat jokes.
So let me ask, I was actually going to ask you, was the writing, did the writing come from, did you sit around and start thinking, okay, Did you start going, do I start with self-deprecation?
Always.
How did the writing develop? Because obviously you're writing on the fly and an improv class, because literally I just saw a Groundling show last night. But so you're coming up with things, on the fly. But then eventually when you're going to do stand-up, you've got to write your own material. What was the transition for you?
It was, so I lied and said I was going, a producer in Portland. So I moved to LA. I did improv in college for like 2 years and I loved it. And I was asking my uncle, the teacher, I was like, what else can I do? Because I've exhausted Portland's opportunities to teach me improv. And he was like, well, you should go to the Groundlings in LA. And so I dropped out of college and I moved to LA.
What's the conversation that your parents have with your uncle at that point? Hey, I mean, thanks for convincing our son to drop out of college.
What did you do?
I think my parents saw, like, I had done a few like local improv shows and they saw that I was really good at it. And I told them,
probably saw that you were happy as shit doing it too.
Happy as shit doing it. And they saw like the joy on my face. And my mother was a little more okay with it than my father was, but my parents are divorced, so they couldn't even provide a united front. So I was just like, hey, I'm going. And also, like, my dad, both of my parents, very supportive emotionally. And my mom, like, took out some loans in her name for me to go to college, but outside of that, they weren't supporting me financially. So there was no ability for them to also, I had my bar mitzvah money saved away. Ace in the hole.
I was going to ask you, how did you move to LA and able to sort of survive yourself? And did you start taking Groundlings classes? That's where you were.
Immediately. I flew down. I auditioned. I got in, which I thought it was going to be like auditioning for Juilliard. And apparently they take everybody. But you couldn't tell me that.
No, it was you.
Did you have anybody here, like a foundation of friends or anything?
Not a soul. I knew nobody in LA. And this was 2006, something like that.
Terrifying. I don't understand how people do it. I've had this conversation with a number of guests. I just don't know how people do it. You're like, fuck it, I'm doing it. I don't know anybody. And it's the loneliest city in the world until you find a crew.
The loneliest.
Loneliest city in the world.
I was going on Craigslist was it. Like, I guess we had MySpace, but like I didn't know anyone in LA on MySpace. And
we don't talk about that anymore.
I didn't have fucking MySpace. I threw my shit in my car and I stayed in hotels for like a week, rapidly depleting my savings as I was on Craigslist.
And when you say hotels, is that with quotes?
Like sketchy sunset places.
They were like the cheapest
hotels.
The cheapest places that hadn't been associated with murder that I could find.
Sure.
But some of them were pretty dodgy. You would go to some places and you're like, oh, well, fuck. Okay, this is it. And I eventually found a place to live that was in South Central. I didn't know what that meant. I thought there would be a sign that said like, welcome to South Central. And it wasn't until I'd signed the lease that the two women who lived there, who were two kids who went to USC, they were like, by the way, you live in South Central now. How does it feel? And I was like, oh shit. Okay.
And you call him back home and you tell him your mom, everything's great. Everything's fantastic.
Good. In LA, South Central.
I'm fucking terrified, dude. But it was terrifying. And I got a job at a PF Chang's in Torrance. So I worked at PF Chang's. I did the Groundlings classes. But I eventually moved.
So for people that don't know this, and I just want to make this point. Yeah. To be working at a P.F. Chang's in Torrance and living in South Central and going to the Groundlings is literally exhausting. Almost impossible. You'd never do it again.
Never.
Driving those distances. It's horrible.
Free podcast, by the way, too. So you're just sitting there running the same few scenes.
You and you. Just you and you. More self-contemplation in the car. The fuck am I doing working at PF Chang's, going to the Groundlings? What is going on?
But you're romantic about it at that point, right? You're like, this is my journey. This is it. This is, this is.
Well, you were young enough to be romantic about it.
Well, and then you get to the Groundlings and everybody's doing what you're doing. And back in Beaverton, people didn't get it, right? Like, so you go there and everybody wants to do this.
I did that. I made it through the first 2 levels and they were like, okay, it's a 1.5 year wait to get into the 3rd level. I was like, Jesus, okay. And I stuck around LA for a couple months after that. And I was like, there's nothing for me. If I start an improv group, there's nowhere for us to perform because it's LA. So no one's going to come see the amateurs. I didn't do stand-up at that point. So I was like, oh, you know what? I'll move back to Portland. I'll finish my degree and then I'll come back. And when I got back to Portland, I started an improv group and we started performing. And a producer was like, hey, you do stand-up, right? And I lied. I was like, Yeah, of course. I've always done stand-up.
Stand-up king over here.
Yeah, like basically it's I'm basically George Carlin. And so she booked me for the show and it was in 3 weeks. And so I sat down and I started writing. I'd always loved stand-up. I'd always loved watching it, but I didn't think it was a thing you could even do. I was like, I don't understand what that first day of stand-up is like, right? Like I understand how you get a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. You go in, you give up on your dreams, and you apply at the front desk, right? But I'm like, how do you start doing stand-up? I had no idea. So this person luckily asked me, and I sat down and I wrote. And the first time I ever went on stage, I did 45 minutes.
Whoa.
What?
Which was insane because I didn't understand like what a page of writing correlated.
You didn't understand editing is what you didn't
certainly
understand.
Didn't. And people don't believe this, but it went great. The first set, I fucking crushed.
Why don't people believe it? Have they not seen your work? Of course, I believe it's great. It went great.
It went great, but you're like full of adrenaline and you're like pouring everything into it. And you're like, it's in a real fight or flight thing. I've been used to being on stage.
It probably didn't feel like 45 minutes.
Exactly right. It flew by. The subsequent 15 sets didn't go well, but
sure.
You came down to earth. But at that point I was kind of like off to the races. And
but the beauty of that too is now you didn't have to rely on getting everybody together to do your thing. It was just you, a pen and a pad, and you could do your own thing.
I could dictate how hard I wanted to work. I didn't have to like bully other people into rehearsing improv 5 nights a week, because they were like, I want to go see a movie with my girlfriend. And I would be like, no.
Sons of bitches.
Yeah.
How dare they?
Like, you don't want it enough. You don't know what it feels like to drive to P.F. Chang's in Torrance.
What about self-worth? Did this book sort of begin to make you look at your own self-worth as a thing rather than something that you don't really think about?
It did. I mean, one of the reasons like I didn't go to therapy for the longest time was because I was like, well, I know what's wrong with me. So if I know what's wrong with me, what is a therapist going to tell me? Why even bother going in there? And it was almost the same kind of thing with this.
Did you discover the answer?
I did discover the answer. I did discover the answer.
You might have.
It's because I had this extra $278 every week that I needed to get rid of. And I found a lady who would take it.
Sure. There you go. There you go.
But I had all these thoughts in my head that I'm like, I'm aware of all this. I know my relationship with self-worth. I do that. I don't need to examine it. And that's when I started writing it down for the book.
How do you define it, by the way? How do you define it? How do you define self-worth? Just your own version of it.
I guess the most useful definition of self-worth to me is loving yourself enough to do the hard stuff.
To go to the doctor for the first time, to make that leap?
Yes, to go to the doctor, to end relationships that aren't working, to show up for friends or family, even if it's not the easiest thing for you to do that day, to show up for yourself, to have a salad instead of a Reuben for dinner. That's self-worth. To actually go to therapy, to do the things that to work hard, to like have a dream.
I love that definition, by the way. It's outstanding. Outstanding.
Ian, did you hide behind your work once you found success? Did you use work as a shield as well?
I used it as...
Gee, why do you ask, Jason?
Because I use it every single day and every minute of every hour of every day.
Gee, why that question, JB?
What's weird about it is I think your work, you can definitely hide behind it, but I think it's also an important component of self-worth, right? Like, I think the idea of having a goal and sitting down and actually working through it and applying yourself and seeing it through, rather than just sour grapesing it or saying, oh, the industry hates XYZ, so I'm not even going to try. Like, sitting down and actually doing it is a good example of having self-worth. But it can't be the only thing. What I've discovered is you can't take, I'm a successful comedian and people like me, and take that and put it in the hole created by kids laughed at me when I was fat, and I had it when my high school girlfriend broke up with me because somebody said, doesn't he sweat a lot when you guys are getting after it? Like, I can't take these things and put it in that
There's
hole.
not enough of it. Well, there's not enough of it. There's not enough of it to fix that.
There's not.
But by your definition, Ian, Jason, you would be taking a holiday.
Well,
Love yourself enough to do the things that are hard for you, like taking a holiday. That would be yours,
but
JB.
like you're saying, Ian, like I find work to define my self-worth. Like by
Yeah.
accomplishing X, Y, and Z, then okay, I made something out of my day and I only have, X amount of them in my life. So I need to use each one. And that's how my brain works.
But you bring up a good point, and I wanted to ask
Mhm.
Ian about this, is that, how are you finding, did you find the balance between those things? Because that's really what it is. It's finding a balance between things that I can do that give me a sense of self, and then escaping life by doing the things that I do. And how do you find a balance between those two things?
I think some people might think, especially if they're on the other side of it and feeling like very out of balance, that maybe it's a thing that you get and then you stay in that balance forever, right? But it's
Fools.
Fools! It's
you mean they arrive on Fuck You
Right.
Island, as I like to call it?
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, they
I'm on Fuck You. I got it. That's it. I'm done. I can relax.
right.
now.
He's on Fuck You
Yeah.
Island. He figured it out.
Yeah.
The truth is, it's like you're on roller skates in the back of a moving truck, right? Like you're constantly,
You get a good turn. You get a good turn that you can actually just balance.
but it might stop short,
I
and then
love
you're
that
slamming
metaphor.
into the back of it, and it's all about.
I love that metaphor. Is outstanding.
Thank you, but that's how it feels, right? That's
outstanding.
that's what having a sense of self-worth is like, because your life is going to throw you for a loop
Right.
all the time. You're going to think you're in balance, and then your mother tells you she has cancer, right? Which is a thing that happened to me. She's safe and alive and everything's good now.
Thank
Knock
God.
on wood. But you that kind of thing is going to happen. Life is going to throw that shit
Well,
at you.
honestly, but then some days you're just having a bad day. You wake up, you have one of your bitter grapefruits, and you're like, "Fuck this world," And sometimes little things set you off too. You never fucking know what's going to set you off.
One of your bitter grapefruit.
Like, maybe today's the day. You pluck it off the tree, and it's fucking exactly right. Both metaphorical and lyrical.
Did you come up with, like, did you, in terms of thinking about, your sense of self, were you an affirmations guy? Were you like a spiritual readings guy? Were you are you, I shouldn't say,
Oh, you
you
mentioned
are you?
meditations. There's some ohms. Yeah.
I
Some ohms in
meditate,
there.
but I am a very practical meditation person where I am a focused on the breathing. So I don't have nothing wrong if you're a mantra person or anything like that. If you do like transcendental meditation, I am trying to accomplish mindfulness, I guess, through I breathe in for 4 seconds, I breathe out for 4 seconds, and I count it, and then I try to eventually get myself off of being aware of the counting. And it's like
Trying to be in the moment of where you are in that particular day.
exactly right. And like anything else we've discussed, it's a practice. It is not it's a thing that you have to keep doing and that you have to stick to, and a thing that where some days it's just not going to work. And that doesn't mean you don't try to do it anyway. My affirmations to answer that question are work. It is the going to the gym. I don't sit down. I don't do like gratitude journaling. Although I think that can be wonderful. Although sometimes I do it in my head. I'll do like a mental checklist of everything that's lovely.
For people who are scared to get to the gym, that want to lose weight, what was that first experience like where you were ready to get to the gyms, and what got you through the door?
So not to misread, well, they had to widen it. That was the first thing. But then also,
Sure, of course.
I can't get rid of some of the instincts. I was lucky. I played football. I was well acquainted with working out in the gym and especially weight training and all that stuff. But for me, it was especially when I was at my biggest and I hadn't really been going to the gym for a while. I was like, let me build up to 10,000 steps a day. That was my first thing. And everybody's phone has a counter
measure,
on it.
yeah.
You got a pedometer.
Yeah.
And I started at like 6. And it was weird. I was medicating my blood pressure, which makes you feel weaker, because when you're like on this like insane blood pressure, then as bad as it is for you, the blood is at least getting to your muscles. And once it first starts to fall, you feel weaker.
Like lightheaded, like that kind of thing. A
little bit lightheaded, but also just like your legs get tired faster, your muscles fatigue faster. So I started at 6,000 steps a day, and then I built up to like 7,000 and built up to 8 and eventually got to 10. And then I made 10 my you don't fall below this number marker. And I would make it a goal, even if I got home from work and I was tired, or if my wife and I were in the middle of a Lord of the Rings marathon or whatever, and it's like 11 and we've got 2 hours to go, I'll say, I'm sorry, I have
Sure,
to.
as people do.
Yeah,
Of
as you know,
course.
some people do, whatever it is.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever that
sure.
life thing is, I say I have to go get the 10,000. I can't.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. I have to go.
Still to this day?
Still to this day. And then I started going back to the gym. I full disclosure, worked with a personal trainer for a little bit to.
That was what I was going to ask you, because one of the things I was going to ask you this because it's my experience, so I wanted to know if it was your experience. That they talk about you get self-esteem or self-worth by doing esteemable acts.
Yeah.
Right. The problem is that most people need help to do the esteemable acts.
Yes.
They're not self-motivated, and so a lot of the times that I have had to do esteemable acts in order to gain self-esteem or a sense of self-worth, I got help.
What is an esteemable act? Like working out? Is that what you?
Well, essentially, the definition, the wonderful definition given by Ian, which is loving yourself enough to do the hard stuff. And so what you're left with is esteemable acts and the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we're not watching the second half of this until I do my 10th. That's really hard. Walking through, choosing discomfort is very difficult. I find it's very difficult. But when you consistently choose discomfort, what ends up happening is you start growing and changing and evolving, and that starts building your own sense of self. And for me, and this is just my own experience, I've needed a lot of assistance and help from others in order to do those things.
That's 100% true. And that can be working with a personal trainer, or it can just be, the best thing about the personal trainer for me was the accountability.
To the show up.
It's the show up.
It's the show up.
I'm paying this dude $90, and I'm not showing up that day. So I'm just throwing $90 in a toilet. And also now there's a big buff dude who's disappointed in me. I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
I don't want to let down the big buff dude. And I realized also that resources, a lot of people can't afford a personal trainer. And so the version of accountability that's a lot more affordable is maybe having a gym buddy, or even a thing that my family and I have now is a group chat that we all post in when we're at the gym.
That's great. Yeah.
So there's this level of accountability.
Yeah, I was going to say a bookend, like even your buddy, you're like, hey, I'm doing a bookend, like I've done it in terms of like, I've had, like, I think I got overwhelmed. I had like 4 or 5 auditions in a week, and they were all they were all important. Right. And so I would literally go, okay, I'm doing the first 25 minutes. And then I'm at 25 minutes. I go, all right, I did the first 25 minutes. And that's how I sort of had to get through it. So I didn't feel like,
mini goals help you get
but also being accountable to somebody else instead of expecting, easy for me to say, expecting yourself to be able to self-discipline your way through taking action while you're dealing with a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear of the result.
Yes.
It's too much.
Because it's so easy to let yourself off the hook. You're like, you know what? I see how hard this is for you because I'm you too. So let me go ahead and let you off the hook for it.
That's great because I'm you too. That's funny. I like it.
I do have one question about self-worth from your book, Ian, which is you have this chapter of where it sounds like you found some self-correction. You were using relationships as validation, and that gave you self-worth. At what point did you realize that you were on the wrong path there, that you were seeking validation for the wrong reasons?
When you realized they were human beings?
When they were human beings.
Yes. When you realize there's actually people there?
That they too have self-worth. Yeah.
Right. And I was oftentimes abusing that self-worth. I had such a fakakta relationship with sex and relationships because of such a that was the area in my life that I had the least self-worth. Because everything in my life, from popular culture to my own experiences, pointed me towards fat dudes don't date beautiful women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in sitcoms, the whole, it's a joke, right? It's a joke that Kevin James is with a beautiful woman. They bring it up all the time. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. And that led me to, once I got successful, and what was really happening was I was finding some self-confidence, and I was believing in myself a little bit more. And I finally had enough confidence to actually approach women and see myself through to the point where I was, either going on dates or just hooking up for a one night stand or whatever. What was happening was like I believed in myself, so I liked myself a little bit more, but I perceived it as these women who had rejected me for my entire life up till that point. Even though they hadn't rejected me, I'd rejected myself because I wouldn't even let myself approach them. I had pre-rejected my application.
The idea of them had rejected you. Sure, I understand.
Exactly right. But once they started accepting me, I was like, oh, I see how it is. So you're just latching on to me because I'm this funny, successful, up-and-coming stand-up comedian. So you're commodifying.
By the way, you're not wrong. By the way, you're not wrong.
Oftentimes you're not wrong. Those people are out there, but I was prescribing that to every single relationship I was in. And also, by the way, that is born of a severe lack of self-confidence because I was suspecting them of it.
Right.
But it's also your only value, right? At that point, it's your only value.
Yeah, you're going into it thinking this girl can't love me, so it's an even playing field. I'm gonna do whatever I want.
She's beautiful, so I'm using her for her beauty. She's using me for my cachet or whatever it gives her.
I like cachet. Cachet is good. I love it. Very nice.
Fun word. It sounds intercontinental.
I thought it worked really well. Sorry.
Cachet. No, I appreciate it. And I would treat them in kind oftentimes. If a woman would deny me affection, I would chase it to the point where, like, I talked to a woman, we should have broken up 6 months earlier, but I kept talking her into staying with me because I liked her beauty validating me. She was a traditionally beautiful woman. And I thought if people saw me, and if I saw myself dating this traditionally beautiful woman, that there must be nothing wrong with me.
Right. And so on the outside, you stopped looking at your own self-worth and how other people saw your worth, right?
Yeah.
She helped up other people's worth of you.
She was like an easy pass card. It was like, you think I'm from some fat slob who no one could love? Well, explain this, buddy, but at the same time, I was denying them their humanity. I was denying myself my humanity. And if they ignored me or showed no interest, and I would pursue them. And if they did like me, some part of me would be like, you're an idiot. You like me?
The Groucho Marx.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. Like I would never be a member of a club that would have me as a member, right? That kind of thing.
Yes.
And I would emotional abuse is probably too strong of a word, but it's definitely too strong of a word. But I would play with these girls like expectations. I would let them think that I was interested in a relationship.
You would survive in order to keep them. You would do whatever needed to be done or said in order to keep them.
If they thought that I was somebody who was interested in marrying them, I would let them think that if I meant I got to date them for a couple of weeks, even if at my core I knew that wasn't happening. Or, I would invite them to a party and then I would leave that party before, or just on my own. I would be like, I'm out of here, whatever. Like I would just not treat them the way a loving, empathetic person would treat them. And
because you hadn't loved and empathized with yourself yet. That's
exactly right.
But also they're a commodity.
They're a commodity.
And you don't really know that. You don't really know that until you go, ooh, people's feelings are being hurt. I'm kind of a dick. And you don't realize that people's feelings are being hurt.
No, and also when their feelings would get hurt, it would be like, well, welcome to my world. That's what I've been going through for the last 2 decades.
There's the empathy we know and love.
Yeah. I would feel like that, and it was on to the next one because I had strip mined all the validation.
You're an empath. You're an empath.
I'm an empath.
You can see
I am now. I am a little bit, but I would strip mine all the validation from these women, move on to the next thing, and eventually I got to the point where, I was sitting, it was shortly before I met the woman who would become my wife.
Who has wonderfully color-coded bookshelves.
But I was...
Loves Lord of the Rings and married you. I mean, we love her. We love her.
She's brilliant, wonderful, and beautiful as well, but, and I guess I do get some validation out of that, but it's not the core basis of our relationship. I actually really like this person, and I really like myself. And most importantly, I was willing to share enough of myself and be vulnerable enough with her that, I could.
You mean you were willing to risk enough of yourself?
Exactly. exactly right. That I was like, oh, this person actually sees me and loves me for who I am rather than just what I can
Now
offer.
you're both wearing the roller skates and holding on to the back of the truck together. So
Exactly. Yeah. We go down together. But it took a bunch of these relationships and for me, and also women hurting me along the way too. It wasn't just me going through this string of like fuckboydom where I was, swinging from one broken soul to another. A lot of the times the women were hurting me and not loving me in a real way either.
That's the name of your next book, by the way. Ian Karmel, Fuckboy. I like that one.
Ian Karmel, Fuckboy. Yeah. It's on my business card. I have a whole box of them that I can't even use anymore because I'm married now. But it took sort of slowing down, and I wish I could tell you there was one rock bottom, but that wasn't really it. It was just me after a string of these relationships, each one like if you think of me as a video game character, lowering my health a little bit each time.
Well, when I read the book, Ian, I felt like you were kind of discovering some of it while writing that chapter. It felt like, from the start of that chapter to the end, you were going, you didn't pull any punches on yourself. You just, you gave it to yourself.
I think it was important. The entire process of writing this book, I was like, if this has any chance of people A, enjoying reading it, and B, it helping the people that I hope it helps, then I have to be completely honest. And that means being completely honest about myself too, and how I was, a good person on balance, but in relationships you wouldn't have wanted.
But I think you're touching on a very, very common, and I would say even prevalent experience, which is people trying to validate themselves through romantic relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, both sides, it's very, very common, and it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable at all. It
Because what ends up happening is you find a human being there instead of a badge.
Yeah, exactly. And you will hurt that human being, or that human being will hurt you.
Or they'll hurt you.
Or they will hurt you.
Yeah, and you'll go, why am I being hurt? Because the only reason you're with this person is to have the badge. That's why you got hurt.
Right. And now you feel that validation being ripped away.
That's all you had. That was the whole point. You can't go anywhere. I need this. Do you need it though? And again, it's hard. I applaud your getting help and having therapy, and a lot of the stuff, until you're in enough pain and get help, you don't really even know it's going on. It just seems normal.
Absolutely. And by the way, therapy.
I mean, I've read.
Yeah. Therapy is not some like fix all either. By the way, like,
no, I don't think so. I don't think therapy is.
Yeah.
But if you find a decent therapist,
it can be great.
Then at least you're talking about it.
I also want to put, like, a lot of people say you can't love another person until you love yourself, and I think that's true, and it isn't true at the same time.
I don't think it's true at all. By the way, but how's this? You can. I completely disagree with that statement. I think you can't maintain a relationship by continuing to hate yourself. However, I think you can learn to love yourself by loving somebody else.
I think that's true. I think that's 100% true. And I think also it puts light to the fact that loving yourself is some marker you cross, like it's some finish line, when it's like it's the same basis of self-esteem, where it is a act, right? Loving yourself is an act that you need to repeat 100 times.
It's somewhere you arrive. That's the big fallacy,
like there's a finish line.
You're gonna arrive at self-love.
Like somebody gives you a trophy and a sash where it's like, I love myself. Now I can finally start my Hinge
Well, we
profile.
all get a trophy now, Ian. So we all love ourselves.
That's true.
That's true. Everybody gets a trophy. You're good enough, and gosh darn it, people like you.
People like me. Yeah.
This was terrific. We do have one quick listener question. Dan,
Sure.
you got this
I got
one's
the
quick
listener
and
question.
easy for him. Well, this one's easy.
All right, you're a big football fan. As a Portland kid, what NFL, I'm assuming, team did you root for, and why? Ken O wants to know. You're a football fan? I'm a football fan.
This is perhaps the most heartbreaking story that we'll touch on the entire time.
You're a Cleveland Browns fan.
I grew up in a cul-de-sac, and the kid across the street was from Texas, right? So this was the early 90s, and he was a Dallas Cowboys fan. And I said, well, I'll take the other good team then. And I became a Buffalo Bills fan.
Oh, Thurman
God.
Thomas years? That's
Thurman
why?
Thomas, Jim Kelly, Bruce Smith, like early on.
Starter jacket. You were rolling.
I had the starter jacket and everything. I was styling out in the Oregon winters. I loved it. but this was early. This was like at Super Bowl 1, right? Because these were the 2 ascendant teams at the time. So I just set myself up for 4 years of heartbreak, followed by, basically another 2 decades of heartbreak.
And now
misery.
Josh Allen just almost getting there every time.
Almost.
It's pretty good right now, though. It's pretty good right now.
It's pretty good, and I have since become less of a Buffalo Bills fan and more of just an overall rooting for the NFL. But my big allegiance was the Oregon Ducks, and I remain a huge college football fan. Go Ducks!
Big Oregon Ducks fan. My daughter went to Oregon. I've been to Autzen many times. Woo! I love it. Go Ducks! Yeah.
One of the most unique environments in college football. It's built into a hill. It's loud as fuck. It's amazing.
It's terrific. It's a terrific experience.
Ian,
really
how can folks track you, find you, and pre-order the book? Because I know pre-orders are so important these days.
Pre-orders are massively important. It tells the publishers how much money they should spend on advertising, because they're like, well, once they have a successful book, then they spend more money on advertising.
Makes total sense.
Not my circus, not my monkey. I'm not going to tell them how to do it. But what it is important is if the book sounds interesting to you at all, if you were a fat kid, if you are currently a fat kid, if you have a fat kid in your life who you love, of any age, I think this book is both entertaining and fun. And also, because I wrote it with my sister, who is a doctorate of got her doctorate in clinical psychology, just a really smart person. She's a doctor. She comes after every essay with her perspective of what was going on. So I think it's a lot of sugar and a lot of medicine at the same time. So I think will really help them out. But you can pre-order it now anywhere books are available. That's everywhere from Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org lets you pre-order it through a local bookstore where they get the money for it. And I think that's an awesome thing that you can do.
That's cool.
Yeah. And
I got the digital, Ian. What color is your cover? What is the where will that be?
It's yellow and blue. It's got a fat kid. It's got a fat kid on the cover. It's great. It's not me, although it looks exactly like how I look.
Oh my God. I love him. Dude, I can just chat with that dude. He's fucking great.
He's not only hilarious, but he has that voice that I love his voice as well.
I just appreciated his I don't fucking know. This is what I did. This is what I'm doing. It seems to be working. I'm not really sure how this is all going to work out at all, but so far so good. And it was amazing to hear about this, really heavy guy that was just, slaying them, banging cocktail waitresses 2 at a time. I'm just being funny here. The point is that he talked about that period of his life as a real problematic period. He was successful. He was getting adoration and adulation and validation. He was sleeping with attractive women. He had it all. And he was fucking dying.
Right. But that's an LA vibe too. I couldn't do that here in the woods in Mansfield.
You don't know.
Oh, I know.
Oh, you don't know.
All right. Well,
you can go over to Attleboro.
Oh, yeah, baby. That's where they do it. Attleboro style.
That's Attleboro style. That's where you go. No, but it was great. And the book is both sad and touching and moving and funny. And it's cool, man. Yeah, he's great. He's great. Please get the book. You'll enjoy it. If not, just text me or write me or hit me up on the IG and tell me how wrong I am, but you won't.
Well,
and yeah, thank you for listening.
Music by Denny Nucci. Produced and edited by the same 2 people you heard hosting this show because they have no friends.